Hi, everyone. Welcome to PeopleMetrics Live. So today we are concluding our two-part series on the patient hierarchy of needs, which are the 5 essential needs that we've heard from patients that they expect support programs to fulfill. Now, on our last session, we did discuss the first 3 fundamental needs, and today we're closing that out in reviewing the 2 services that you must provide in order to differentiate your patient support program. So before we dive into that, let's go ahead and do some quick introductions. My name is Kirk. I've been a project manager here at PeopleMetrics for a number of years, running patient feedback programs. I'm here to share my expertise on that process, and I'll turn it over to Sean.
Hi, everybody. Sean McDade, founder and CEO of PeopleMetrics. Great to be here, as always.
And with that out of the way, let's get into this week's PeopleMetrics Live session, the 2 services you must provide to differentiate your patient support program. So, Sean, on the last session, we covered off on those core patient needs that patients have, and we discussed how pharma does generally well in supporting those. How well do they do in kind of these top core differentiating needs?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say overall well, but there's still work to be done. Like, I think support programs in general do a really good job. I think our data shows that, patients and HCPs tend to be satisfied and have good experiences with support programs. And most importantly, they drive outcomes like, onboarding and adherence and medical outcomes. So that's why it's a really good investment, we think, for pharmaceutical companies. But there's always, more work to be done. And the stakes are really high, right, Kirk? So, we do work in tons of different industries. And, it's one thing if a guest waits a few extra minutes at the check-in line to check into a hotel, and they're dissatisfied with that and have a poor experience. It's another if a patient is unhappy with the support they're getting during the onboarding process for a new medication and they don't onboard, right? That has a lot bigger implications, health implications, medical implications. So it's just, the stakes are a lot higher, right? So I think the bar is just raised, I think, for pharma in this case, but it's worth it because this is like the fundamental part of their business. It's like they work so hard to create these products to enable an onboarding experience that's really good. Seems really worthwhile to me.
Yeah, that's a great point as far as just what's the impact of getting this right and of getting this wrong, is that in the case of, for these 2 needs, these correlate very heavily with adherence and with onboarding. So it is important to get this right. And after you've kind of laid all the groundwork, there's no purpose in tripping over when you're so close to the finish line. So maybe it would help by just giving that framework again. So starting off, with talk about these patient needs. What is that framework? So let me go ahead and I'll share my screen. So
let's do it. Yeah. Right. So this should be familiar. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this type of framework is what we've based our patient hierarchy of needs model for patient support services on. And, for those of you who are looking at this, like, what is this? These are basic needs that humans have in order to have a fulfilled life. And the basic theory is there are certain needs that need to be satisfied before other needs become even relevant. So in this case it's hard to really worry about achievement and respect and problem solving and realizing your potential unless you have a place to live, and you feel safe and have good health, right? So that's the whole idea behind this. And, this has been around for a long time, but I think it's intuitive for people to see, you know what, until I have food, water, and a place to live, then I'm not really worried about, my achievement levels and do I really have purpose in my job, in my life. But once I get those and I feel safe and I have, a loving family and good friends, then those are paramount. Then those are things, that's all I think about. And I think that's the same thing with patients. And we talked about last time, the fundamental needs are, basically access to the medication through financial access, right? So I can afford it, right?
Jump over.
So there it is, right? I can afford it. That's like the base need. Then I know where to find it. I can access this through pharmacy, or I can get travel assistance to obtain it. And if appropriate, I know in some way how to administer it, right? So those were the three. And for some products, if the administration is obvious, if it's a pill, but if it's an injectable or something like that, then it may not be as obvious and it could be more complicated. So it's those three levels. And today we're going to talk about, the top two levels, which we call support system and confidence. And this is really where we think there's two, you can really differentiate your support programs on these, two needs. But we want to emphasize again, not at the sacrifice of the base needs. Like the base needs are the base needs and they have to be fulfilled. And we know that pharma spends a lot on that base need of financial security, as they should. Right? There's no question. We're not saying that shouldn't happen. However, there are ways to really raise your patient support program to another level by looking at these last two, these top two in the triangle.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add to that, of course, I mean, it's structured as a pyramid for a reason because it needs that strong base. And so this isn't exactly as you said that you can neglect these other three. It's that you need to keep building upon them. And these are kind of the last two that need to be satisfied. And again, not from us just making this up, but from what we've heard from patients, these are the things that they talk about and are interested in getting fulfilled.
Without a doubt. Yeah, this model, that's a good point, Kirk. So just to reiterate, this model was based on 5 or 6 years of working with pharmaceutical companies around the experience patients have with the support programs. So this is based on lots and lots of both quantitative and qualitative data that came in, and we looked at it all together. And these are the patterns or themes that emerged. And there are questions that correspond, and we went through them in the last PeopleMetrics Live. There are questions that correspond to each of those first three levels, and there's more questions that correspond to the top two. So these are actual questions you can ask your patients, during the onboarding process, or even after, in some cases, the onboarding process, to understand their experience.
All right. Well, with that, should we jump on to our first one of support systems and go over exactly what are those questions? And
let's do it. Let's do it. Right. So you may have recalled, if you saw the previous PeopleMetrics Live, there weren't a lot of questions in the first three. There were just a couple, and in one there was, I think, just one. Here there are a bunch of them. And support system is a big category. Fundamentally, patients need to feel like they have someone on their side when they're onboarding onto a new medication. This is especially true for kind of rare disease products. And you'll see some of these questions have specific case manager items on it, which is connected to a very high touch patient support services program, right? Which link to orphan drugs, rare disease drugs. But a couple of them can apply to any of them. So any type of product, any type of drug, mass market, specialty, what have you. So the first question is, I have a clear understanding of even what's available to me, what support services are available to me, and I feel confident that that's something, and that's the next level, but I have an understanding, right? So we know that's an important question, right? Kirk, and you've done a lot of these programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the most difficult things about being a patient and getting support from these programs is just that it can be a lot, can be so much. And so to have an understanding of what are my options, what's available to me, that is its own baseline that you need to get right. That often you might not. There might be there are nuances to these programs. There's a lot of detail to them, and communicating that effectively to patients is its own skill. And if they do feel kind of left out, then you don't feel supported.
Without a doubt. And you can ask this question too, that this applies to all products. The second one also around the level of communication that the patient receives during onboarding. So I think our scale on this is it's 3, I think, items, right, Kirk? It's about not enough, too
just
much,
the right amount,
and too much.
Absolutely.
And Pharma does a good job, but this is a good one. Generally good scores. We have benchmarks on all of these questions, by the way. Like, so we have data that we've accumulated on all these items. But this is one that has pretty good ratings. But it's very, very important. It's around communication. It's around clarity of what you offer. It's around clarity around anything to do with the onboarding process. So that's a super important question.
Yeah, and it's important to ask. I think some of the companies out there might be surprised at their patient perceptions, because there often is a fear of, I am communicating too much, I am, being too bombarding. But again, often with disease states, with support programs, you want as much information as possible. So it is very likely that you might be surprised by how patients feel about the communication they get from you, whether it's enough.
Now, the last three are all about case managers. And case managers, by the way, are incredibly important to a great patient experience. If you have them, they are definitely an advantage for you. I know they're expensive. It's a high touch environment. However, they do pay off in spades from the data that we're seeing. We're just seeing that people who feel like the case manager was super effective, they're much more likely to onboard, and they had a better experience overall than those who don't feel like they were of value. So there's a few questions around this, around their overall satisfaction with the case manager, whether the case manager provided up-to-date information and accurate information, and just an accessibility question, which is super important. Like, could I get in touch with the case manager when I needed to? All of these questions, if you have case managers, are ones that we would highly recommend asking.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, this is case manager focused, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. These could be framed of, if you have more of a broader just call center, these can be framed to a call center. Or if you have a chat support, it can be framed to a chat support, or any other kind of model app to support patients. It's all about those underlying needs and how well are you providing that network of support that they're looking for.
Kirk, even if you have a pure digital offering, you could put this, you could have portal, app, or anything in place of case manager. What's your satisfaction with the portal? How strongly do you agree the portal provided accurate, up-to-date information? And how was it accessible to you at all times? In terms of reliability, just uptime, things like that. Like you could substitute these for anything you have, and if you have both, you could certainly add that to the question. So you could talk about both your digital kind of support as well as your in-person support.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if any of those channels that you offer are part of your experience, and you need to make sure you're measuring it. And then I think just one last thing I would note here is this does also apply to other connections, whether that's patient forums or advocacy organizations. Often, you will want to link out to those, whether that's on your website or in communication to patients, because I think something we often hear from patients is there is this sense of you're moving almost between islands of, I'm talking to my doctor and then to my insurance company, and everyone is kind of segregated in their own space. As a support network, it's your responsibility to help shepherd people through this, and so that's these connections to these other groups is very important to that as a component.
Right, and certainly could be part. We've had clients sort of break these out. Like the communication question is around amounts, but you certainly could then ask about specific kind of types of communication that you've provided to patients and ask them about to rate those. And some of those, access to forums, have you communicated advocacy organizations that you could connect with? There's a lot of different things that you could do with these questions. But what we're trying to do is, like, if you only had a few that you were going to ask, we know these work, and these, by the way, have been vetted by multiple pharma legal teams too, which is helpful because part of the challenge of some of these programs is legal will have to review and approve.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, exactly as you said, these have gone through multiple, been shown to many patients and been vetted through many legal teams. So that's a good thing about it. And I think one last thing I note on the support system piece that kind of differentiates it from the other pieces of the pyramid before is that looking at those questions and those topics, they are more soft skill oriented, which it gets to why, a lot of pharma companies do it well, but this is why it tends to be a piece that trips you up. And it is important to get this right, as we said, because it does impact onboarding and adherence. So even if you've successfully navigated through these areas of financial and logistical and medication support, patients still don't feel that level of broader support, and there is a concern, there's a worry there of how stable this is, which is going to impact your choices as your medication and moving forward.
Yeah, and let's also talk about the other reality, and people who are in support services know this. There's certain questions that you can answer and certain questions you can't, right? Just through regulation. And we've seen this with our very own eyes with the data. Patients are frustrated at times that your case managers, for instance, can't answer certain questions, right, Kirk? I mean, you've experienced this. But here's the way I would say it. Even though you can't answer it yourself, doesn't abdicate you from helping them find the answer. So, one client I remember we worked with, I think you were working with them. This was something that was coming up. They couldn't answer a certain question, but instead of saying we can't answer that, there was a new script that was developed with the case managers, linking them to ways they could find an answer. Do you want to find, isn't that true?
Precisely, and it often is, how well do you navigate those boundaries? Because for that particular client, it wasn't even necessarily that you were getting a hard no every time if I can't talk about this. It was that they hadn't trained consistently across their case managers. All they trained to was saying, you can't talk about this. They didn't train, here's the proper answer when this comes up. And so that's a gap when, depending on who you reach, you're getting a different answer to this question. It's all a different form of rejection, but it's not consistent, and it's not helping you through, why this is the case or what you can do.
Right. And the only way you know that is if you get feedback from patients on their experience, and you get to hear from them. All right.
Shall we move on?
Let's go.
Top of the pyramid.
Drum roll, please.
Well, I don't have anything here. Well, I do a bunch, but I'll save us from that.
Confidence. I mean, confidence is everything, both for patients who are going through this process as well as life, right? People who are confident tend to have behavior that is consistent with what you want them to do. And in this case I feel confident that I'm prepared for my treatment, meaning that I'm confident that I can, will, and know how to onboard onto this new medication. So there are a few questions on here. This is an overall question around, based on all of your interactions with patient support services, how would you rate your satisfaction with the program, and why? Why is an open-ended question where they can type in anything. This is really valuable information. However, it's not something that you want to take lightly without any preparation, because you will need to have adverse event reporting processes in place in order to handle those answers in case there is one that veers off into some sort of, adverse event type comment. So that's a caveat there. It's still super, super valuable. And the last question, and the most important question that we've talked about yet, is this last one. And this says, do you feel your experience with, and it could be the company only, or it could be the company and the case manager, if you have case managers, has adequately prepared you to begin treatment? This is a yes or no question. There isn't any scale on this. It isn't ambiguous. And what this question is getting at is, are you ready to onboard? And we found some really interesting data looking at this, right, Kirk? And people basically who are satisfied with the support program and felt like they had a very good experience overall, all of them are saying yes to this question. Virtually everyone, 99%. Those who are not satisfied with the support they got, you're talking about, we've seen like a third of them answer no to that question. Now, that doesn't mean they're necessarily not going to onboard, but they're definitely at risk of not being onboarded properly because they're not confident right now. And that's an issue.
Yeah, there's a risk of not onboarding. There's a risk of not using the medication as specified. There's also a risk of what did we not communicate? We've had, just found, patients, holding onto their medication or using their medication in ways that wasn't expected or wasn't part of the, intended usage. And so providing confidence is truly essential and is the purpose, the ultimate purpose of these programs.
Right. So to me, if I was heading a patient support program, I would have that question. My key performance indicators would be something I'd want to be tracking regularly, would be these questions. How satisfied are our patients with the program? I'd want to have a detailed explanation of why or why not, consistently in their own words. And then, are they prepared for treatment or not? And I'd want to know this, and I'd want to have a consistent, dashboard, if you will, of this type of information, because this is really what it all comes down to. This is why you're spending the time, money, effort to provide these support services to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And not only does it, of course, gives you that sense of how are we performing overall, but also it's, an immediate indication of I need to follow up with a patient if they're not confident. When you ask directly, do you feel prepared for treatment? And a patient tells you no, then you've missed something somewhere here on the pyramid, and you need to follow up with them, and you need to get them to a place of confidence. Otherwise, they may not adhere, they may not on board.
So really, confidence in this model is really an outcome. We understand that. It's not really a need, but it's the top level of where you're going. And you're confident or not, or you're satisfied or not, because of the different pieces that you delivered under that level of confidence. So, did you provide a support system? Did you provide help with administration? Did you provide help with logistical support or financial security? If there are gaps in any of those, then you're at risk of having this confidence level be lower than you'd want.
Sure. And I think, another great thing about that confidence is that it's very possible these needs will change over time. And confidence gives you a good measure of, are we adequately serving all our patients' needs today? Because we have a general understanding of this framework of you need financial, logistical, medication, and support system. And that's what patients are looking for. If an individual patient or broader needs change, that simple question of do you feel prepared is a good way to get ahead of that and be sure, what are we missing? Because patients, when it comes to support programs, don't have such a rigid structure of I expect XYZ from this support program. They expect support from you. This tends to be what that encompasses. But having a direct confidence question makes it very clear when I have a gap and how I need to satisfy that.
Without doubt. And this was fun going through this. In my new book, Pharma Customer Experience, coming out November 30th, happy to announce to everybody. Hey. This model is written in detail, including benchmarks that we found for each one of these. And there's obviously a lot more in that book than just this, but it's definitely something that there's a good bit of content on this model there, because patient support services is the front line for commercial pharma customer experience in our view. Like, that's where a lot of it lands, and it's super important.
Absolutely. And exactly as you said, this is all detailed in the book, is as well. If you didn't get a chance to watch our last session that covers off on the first three pieces of the hierarchy, concluded here today as well. And that is about all we have for today. We are coming up on time, so I think
Kirk, just one other thing.
Sure.
The year is, we do these every other week, and the last two for the year, I think you're going to do an interview with me on the book, because the book's going to be coming out, and we're going to go through some of our thinking behind it, and we're really excited to get this out to everybody. It's been a year or so in the making, and obviously a lot more just trying to understand this pharma customer experience space, which we think is a incredibly important and growing area of focus for pharma, as it should be. Experiences are something that maybe pharma hasn't thought of as something to manage all the time, but it truly is the linchpin we see for successful product launches, as well as sustainable success for products, in the long term. So the experience that your customers have, your patients, your HCPs, the caregivers combined, really will make or break the success of products these days. And we'll talk more and more about that in the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that conversation for sure. We're good to dive into that.
Sure.
So that's all we have time for today. I do hope this has been a valuable conversation for everyone that's been online. And we will make sure that when this goes up on our YouTube channel, we'll include a link to download this diagram so you can share this with other folks on your team and make sure that you are fulfilling these needs for your patients. If you have any colleagues or friends who couldn't make it to this session, and of course, no worries, you can find the session, of course, on our YouTube channel, and you'll also find links there to our other sessions, and you can sign up for future sessions on our website as well, for our blog, and find out how to get copies of Sean's upcoming book, Pharma Customer Experience. So thank you again for joining us. Hope you have a great rest of your day. We hope to see you again soon for another edition of PeopleMetrics Live, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye all. Thanks very much.